Let's talk about soil sizes and where soil comes from. So there are 5 factors that affect how much soil are in an area. The first is climate, then the slope of the land, what types of vegetation you have, the length of time the rocks have been sitting there, and what are the original parent material that has been weathered down to make the soil. Now, some areas have no soil. Some areas can have dozens of meters of soil. It depends on these 5 factors to tell how much soil you have in an area. Now, in general, the wet and warmer the climate is, the more soil you have. The drier and colder it is, the thinner your soil you will have in an area. Now, this also depends on vegetation. For example, a wetter climate will lead to more vegetation, and more vegetation can hold down the soil better and prevent erosion. Slope. The steeper the slope, the thinner the soil. The reason is the steeper slope leads to higher velocities of water flowing, and higher velocities of water flowing can erode soil away quicker. So most mountains, you generally won't find steep mountains with a lot of soil on them. They will have some soil when you start having trees, but for the peaks and the parts that are very steep, you will not. Also, time. The less time that rock has been there to weather away, the less soil you'll have. The more time that rock has been sitting there to weather away, the more soil you will have. Now, soil is different in different places. Some places have more percentage of organic material, whereas other places will have a lower percentage of organic material. In the desert, you might only have 1 to 3, maybe even closer to 0% organic material, just because there is not a lot of living things in desert soils. Some place like a farm may have a lot more organic material because it's got decomposition going on, maybe previous crops have been tilled into the soil itself. It just depends where you are on Earth. Now, as far as properties of soil, well, the size of soil affects 2 big things: porosity and permeability. So, porosity is how much water that the soil holds. Permeability is how easily does water flow through that soil. So, something with a high porosity can hold a lot of water. Something with a high permeability will let water flow through it easily. Clays tend to have low porosity and low permeability, whereas larger particles like gravel would have a higher porosity and higher permeability. So let's start with the soil sizes. So the soil size we're going to cover is gravel pebbles first. They are the biggest soil size that will be covered in this presentation. Gravel pebbles range from 2 millimeters to about 75 millimeters or 7.5 centimeters. Generally, gravel is too big to be moved by wind, but water and glaciers definitely can move gravel and pebbles. As far as their texture, they could be rough, they could be smooth. It just depends on what has been doing the weathering. Sand is smaller than gravel. It ranges in size from 0.05 to 2 millimeters in size. There are different categories of sand, ranging from fine to medium to coarse to very coarse, but in general, sand can be seen with the eyes. It can be picked up by wind, but doesn't go very far. And it generally can be moved by water very easily. Silt is too small to be seen with the naked eye. Silt can be moved by water, and it can easily be moved by wind. Now, silt is so small that when it's picked up by wind, it's become suspended and does not fall back down very easily. So silt can actually be carried very long distances by wind. Clay is the smallest of the soil sizes. So clay is anything less than 0.002 millimeters in size. Clay has a sticky feel when wet, and when dry, you can't brush it off your skin very easily. You have to wash your hands to get the clay to actually come off of your skin. So it is very sticky and it's very small, and you can't see it with anything but a microscope. Now, when it comes to chemical weathering, the smaller the sediment size, the faster chemical weathering can take place. And the reason for that is the smaller the sediment size, the more surface area you have for a given volume of that sediment. So, for example, sand would have more surface area than gravel for the same size of sample. And what would happen is more water can get in between the sand and chemically react with the sand particles than could happen with gravel or boulders.